Pregnant wife, gave birth and millionaire. Filed for divorce. What she did next left everyone speechless. The contraction that finally split the night in two arrived with a wet, tearing sound and the smell of antiseptic. "One more push, Lena," said the nurse, voice steady over the monitor's metronome. In the hallway, cameras blinked red. Security, not paparazzi. But Lena still felt watched, as if the city itself leaned over the hospital bed to see whether a poor girl who married a millionaire could carry grace through pain. She did. Isla wailed into the world, furious and alive. And before they cut the cord, a man in a grey suit appeared in the doorway holding a leather folder. "Mrs. Ashford?" he said. "You've been served." The man with the folder waited just inside the threshold, as if good manners were a life raft that would keep him from drowning in shame. Lena couldn't reach for anything even if she'd wanted to. Her arms shook from the labor, and the world was soft-edged, blurred by exhaustion and the narcotic warmth of immediate love. She had time to register her daughter's mouth, tiny bow, furious, before the nurse, Maya, stepped between the man and the bed. "Not now," Maya said. "Absolutely not." "It's urgent," the man said, "per Mr. Ashford's counsel." The room chilled. Graham, her husband, the man who had kissed the inside of her wrist when the first contraction hit, who'd whispered, "It's us, Elle. It's our whole life starting now." But he wasn't in the room. He had left just before the pushing began, his phone a lit rectangle against his jaw, one finger lifted. "Wait," Maya looked at Lena. "Do you want me to call security?" Lena swallowed. The epidural had worn thin by the end. She felt everything. She nodded. "No," then shook her head. "Yes," then finally managed to say, "Let me see." The man came closer, staying clear of the bassinet where Isla had quieted into a skeptical mule. He showed her the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. "On what grounds?" Lena heard herself ask. The voice was scraped, unfamiliar. The man didn't meet her eyes. Irreconcilable differences. It would take 24 hours for the rumor to travel through Seattle's wealthy enclaves and into the debating halls of the internet. The Ashford's baby wasn't his. That an NDA-bound lab had already tested amniotic fluid and found inconsistencies. That the fitness instructor who came 3 days a week had, allegedly, stopped coming precisely 9 months earlier. The story was a quick thing that moved faster than the truth. It rented rooms in other people's mouths. Lena looked at her daughter. She looked at the nurse who had stayed when the obstetrician rotated out, who had tucked a washcloth beneath Lena's shoulder with the kind of gentleness that made it impossible to speak. "Leave the papers," she said. "Then leave." He did. The nurse closed the door. For a long minute there was only Isla's small breath and the soft ticking of the infusion pump. Maya said very quietly, "I'm sorry." Lena blinked. "I'm not," and it shocked her to realize it was true. She wasn't sorry. Not yet. She was other things. Hollowed out, raw, floating at the edge of a cliff. But beneath the new white pain was something granite hard. If Graham believed that a child with her mother's eyes and his father's mouth was a stranger, the loss was not hers. "Do you want me to call anyone?" Maya asked. "My friend," Lena said. "Priya." She paused. "And Ana Velasquez. She's a lawyer." Maya nodded. "I'll make the calls. For now, let's get Isla to your chest." Skin to skin. Warmth and weight. Lena felt her own heart and the quick bud thud of the baby's, and realized that so many promises were going to be broken in the next 24 hours. She pressed her lips to Isla's temple. "Hi, love," she whispered. "It's us, no matter what." For 2 years before the hospital, Lena had lived in a glass house in Medina, a short bridge from Seattle, but a world away. The Ashford place had a dock and a boathouse and a garden that obeyed. In the early mornings, the fog lifted off Lake Washington like steam from a teacup, and Lena would wrap herself in a sweater and carry her tea through rooms that echoed until her footsteps felt like someone else's. She had met Graham in a downtown coffee shop where she'd been freelancing remotely for a boutique design firm. He had asked her opinion on a pitch deck slide while waiting for his macchiato. "The typography is all bravado," she'd said, "but the numbers are shy." He'd laughed. He'd listened. Graham Ashford, at 29, had been the kind of man cities bend around, founder of a payment startup called Helix, a unicorn in year 3, the son of a former senator whose face appeared on invitations to museum galas and hospital wing openings. He wore the non-uniform uniform, black denim, white shirt. This isn't a suit jacket. He had a way of speaking softly that convinced people to lean in. He was also someone's son, Victoria's. She liked Lena on sight, liked her quiet, her thrift store sweater, the way she could talk about interface design like a poem. "You're a surprise," Victoria said at their second dinner. It wasn't exactly a compliment. They were married on an autumn Sunday at a winery in Woodinville, the vines cheered into color by a late summer that didn't want to end. The prenup was a folder on the table between them for exactly 9 minutes, open and then closed. "It's standard," Graham said. Helix's board had notes. The trust had a lawyer with a face like an ammonite fossil. "It's protection." He squeezed her hand. Lena had not needed protection from money. She had needed protection from loneliness. She signed. They tried for a baby. Then the trying became medicine. After a year, the math of it, the injections, the cantilevered hope, tilted the ground. On a night when she couldn't sleep, Lena sat on the dock and watched the lake until it stopped pretending to be a mirror. Graham joined her and rested his chin on her shoulder. "This is us," he said. "The rest is noise." When she finally became pregnant, he bought an old cedar rocking chair from a shop in Ballard that smelled like rope and pepper. He told her he'd fixed the loose slat himself, hammer and nail, as if he could join their future together by force of will. The first small fracture arrived very quietly. In her 8th month, Lena found a text message on her phone that she'd never sent. "Can't stop thinking about last night." It was to a number she didn't recognize. She assumed it was spam until Graham came home early and asked, in a voice that tried to be careful and wasn't, if there was anything she wanted to tell him. She laughed, then saw that he wasn't laughing. "What number?" she asked. He showed her. Her hands began to shake. Someone had been inside her phone. The home cameras showed a tech from a vendor Riley, Helix's COO and Graham's oldest friend, had recommended coming in to fix the firewall. "It's nothing," she said. "It's obviously nothing." He looked at her like she had become an equation he didn't know how to solve. "I want to believe you." "You don't?" He didn't answer. From there, suspicion crept into the house like weather. The prenatal appointments had a new script. Graham asked about timelines. Once he asked whether feeling the baby kick could be psychosomatic. When her water broke on a rainy Tuesday in September, he found the bag, grabbed the keys, drove her to Swedish First Hill, held her hand between contractions, kissed her palm, then took a call in the hallway that turned each minute into 3. The baby was early. She struggled to breathe. They put her in the NICU for observation. Lena stared at the clear plastic box that held Isla and thought, so this is love. A thread that burns your hands and you hold on anyway. And then the leather folder in the doorway. And then the space beside her bed where her husband wasn't. Priya arrived with a bag of food, so fragrant even the nurses paused. She'd brought dal and rice and mango pickle in jam jars. She was 5 feet tall and all spine, an engineer at a biotech company across the lake, and the first friend Lena had made when she moved to Seattle for graduate school. "You're going to eat if I have to spoon it in," Priya said, setting containers on the tray. Then she saw the papers, and all the air went out of her. "Oh, Lena, I feel awake," Lena said, surprised to discover it. Like the part of me that was asleep finally decided to help. Priya nodded once. "Good. Keep her close." She meant the baby, who lifted a hand, then set it down again as if deciding, yes, this world would do. Ana Velasquez called an hour later and arrived before midnight. Dark hair in a low knot, flats in hand like she had run down hospital hallways before. She was a family lawyer who had made partner at 35 and a reputation a year later by shredding a tech mogul's performative charm to confetti. She glanced at the petition. "They served you in recovery? Before they cut the cord," Lena said. Anna's eyebrows lifted by a degree. "We'll use that." She looked at the pages again. "There's a reference here to pending verification of parentage. Where did that come from?" "An NDA-bound lab, apparently," Priya said, mouth sharp with disdain. Anna's eyes flicked to Lena. "Did you authorize a test?" "No." "Then they have nothing admissible, and even if you had, chain of custody is everything." She turned to Priya. "Can you stay with her the next 48 hours?" "I'm not leaving unless they sedate me," Priya said. "Good." Anna lowered her voice. "Lena, I'll file a response, an emergency motion for temporary support and access. They'll argue the prenup limits you. It does not limit Isla. The court cares about the child. Also—" She hesitated. "I know you may not want to hear this, but a court-ordered paternity test might clear the air." Lena felt a flash of anger. How could the air be cleared when it had never been dirty? Then recognized Anna's pragmatism as a kind of mercy. "Fine," she said. "Chain of custody like Fort Knox." When Anna left, the room quieted. Nurse Maya came in with fresh water and a smile that held. "NICU says she's doing well. Do you want to try to sleep?" "I'm afraid if I close my eyes, I'll wake up and it'll be real," Lena said. Maya stood at the foot of the bed, weighing something invisible. "Earlier this evening," she said, a man in a Helix-branded jacket asked at the nurse's station how the paternity tests at this hospital are handled. Lena's skin prickled. "What did you tell him?" "That we don't do paternity testing in the labor ward." Maya shrugged. "He wasn't a relative. He was curious." "Did he give his name?" "No, but he had a badge clipped to his pocket. R. Baines. Riley." A numbness moved through Lena like anesthesia washing back in. She watched the monitor reflect her heart. Quick, then calmer. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me." Maya's mouth softened. "We have rules. Some are written, some are mine." She patted the bed. "She's yours. That's the first rule." At 3 a.m., Lena fell asleep and dreamed that the dock in Medina became a road that went somewhere she couldn't yet see. When she woke, there was light at the edges of the blinds like a promise carefully worded. Graham did not come to the hospital the next day. A bouquet did, an expensively tasteful collection of white peonies in a vase that looked like a sculpture. There was a card. For Isla. No signature. The florist name gave it away. Victoria liked that florist. Priya recorded everything. Who came, who didn't, who called. Anna filed motions like arrows. The media did not know, not yet. The hospital had protocols that contained reality to the walls. In the NICU, Lena sat in a chair that had been designed by someone who understood pain and watched her daughter fight sleep. On the third day, Anna returned with a folder. "The court granted the temporary support order," she said. "And the DNA test, with strict chain of custody. If he refuses, it will be noted. He'll do it," Lena said. And then, because the other part of the sentence tasted like copper, "if he believes he's right." Priya squeezed her arm. "You're not alone." A social worker from the hospital came by with a soft, practiced voice and pamphlets on postpartum support. Lena took them like talismans. She knew that hormones could turn a body into an unreliable narrator. She made deals with herself. Eat 3 times, walk twice, let yourself cry once without embarrassment. On the 4th day, Isla's breathing evened out like a decision. They brought her to Lena's room, the small triumph marked by the NICU's gentle applause, the kind that is mostly eyes lighting up. Maya hugged them both with her whole face. Later, when Priya had stepped out to take a call, Maya lingered. "I said I wouldn't get involved," she began, which is what people say before they get involved. "But something else. There was a courier who tried to deliver a package for you last night." Maya watched Lena closely. "He asked which nurse had been on shift when your amniotic fluid sample was collected." Lena felt the room tilt. "That's not... We didn't... Exactly." Maya's voice sharpened. "Don't sign anything. Don't accept anything. Not without your lawyer." Lena nodded. "Maya, can I..." She hesitated. "Can I ask how you stay... kind?" Maya smiled at some private memory. "I stopped deciding people were one thing. Helps to keep the heart from rusting. When Lena was discharged, Priya drove her to a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill that smelled like fresh paint. It was a friend of a friend's place, sublet furnished. The view was rooftops and a slice of sky that pinked at sunset. Priya set the bassinet in the main bedroom and then stood triumphantly, hands on hips. "You are not going back to Medina until it's safe," she said. "If ever," Lena texted Graham. "We're home. Isla is strong. You can meet her when you're ready." The message bounced from her phone into air. The read receipt stayed grey. That evening, Anna called. Her tone was surgical. "Helix's counsel reached out to propose a settlement contingent on you, agreeing not to speak to the press about the divorce. Is that normal?" Lena asked. "Sure, for people who are afraid of the truth." Silence thrummed. "The paternity test is Saturday morning at 9. I'll be there." After she hung up, Lena stood at the window and watched a man across the street water his ferns with the attention of an artist. The city breathed. Somewhere a recording studio worked on a song about someone else's loss. She felt the impulse to tell a stranger everything, to open her mouth and pour out a life. Instead, she picked up her daughter and said, "We're going to be okay, Isla. We're not delicate. We look delicate. It's a trick." At 9 a.m. on Saturday, the clinic that did legal DNA testing smelled like printer paper. Anna signed into a log that might as well have been a book of spells. The nurse swabbed the inside of Isla's cheek and sealed the swab into a labeled container like they were packing away a small, bright animal. They swabbed Lena, then waited. Graham arrived at 9:23, breathless, baseball cap pulled low, the disguise of a man trying to be smaller than his name. He looked thinner than he had 4 days earlier, like grief had taken an early draft of him and refused to give it back. He didn't look at Lena. He looked at Isla. Something flickered. He smoothed it away. The nurse called his name. He followed her in. Anna set a hand on Lena's sleeve. "Dignity isn't a performance," she whispered. "It's scaffolding." When it was done, when the samples were sealed and the chain of custody signed in 5 places, they stepped into the grey light of a Seattle morning that was trying its best. Graham spoke first. "This isn't personal," he said. Lena's laugh surprised even her. "It's the most personal thing that's ever happened to us. I had to do this." He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "We have to be certain." "We?" Lena said. "Or your board? Or Riley?" He looked up, eyes dark. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make me the enemy." "Graham," she said very quietly. "I didn't need to make you anything." He flinched, then recovered. "Victoria wants to see her." He nodded to Isla. When it's sorted, Lena felt the urge to say something generous, to be the bigger person, to play the part women are given when men are drowning in their own choices. Instead, she said, "We'll see." That afternoon, Priya watched Isla while Lena met a private investigator Anna recommended, Rafael Quintero, a former King County detective with silver at his temples and a voice that cared about nouns. He had a tablet, a legal pad, the habit of writing with a fountain pen. "Tell me everything," he said. She did. The texts she hadn't sent, the tech who'd fixed a firewall, the courier, the helix-jacketed man at the nurse's station, Riley's improbable omnipresence, Victoria's curated concern. Raphael listened like solutions were a language he could read. "There are 3 pressure points," he said finally. chain of custody for any prenatal material, device access, and motive. He paused. You think the motive is the company. I think the motive is control, Lena said. And the company is the instrument. He nodded, pleased. That's better. 2 days later, Raphael sent a message. Got something. He met her in Anna's office and placed a small flash drive on the table like a relic. Hospital hallway cameras, he said. Your nurse friend was right. Someone sniffing around paternity protocols. A man in a Helix jacket with a badge that reads R. Baines. He speaks to a lab courier outside the elevators. We can't hear the words, but we can see the exchange of a business card. Anna exhaled slowly. This is not proof of anything criminal, but it's a smell. Raphael tucked a second paper into the folder. Also, the firewall vendor, subcontracted to a firm Riley's college roommate owns. There's a record of your phone being cloned for 37 minutes, just enough to send messages. Lena's stomach tightened. Why? Raphael shrugged. He wanted enough smoke to request a prenatal test. If the lab could be influenced or if chain of custody could be muddied, well, Anna finished the thought. Then a wealthy man with a lot to lose could convince himself of what he was already afraid of. Lena stared at the table. Can we prove it? Maybe, Raphael said. And maybe we don't need to. Sometimes you win by telling the story the right way to the right people at the right time. What story? Lena asked. Raphael smiled, brief and precise. The true one. Helix's headquarters occupied a converted warehouse near Pioneer Square. The boardroom had floor-to-ceiling windows and a table that looked like a ship. The day of the board meeting, fog pressed itself against the glass. On the agenda, a vote on a new line of credit, a public filing, the elevation of one R. Baines to president in advance of an IPO. Lena was not invited. She came anyway. She had 1 share, gifted by Graham on their first anniversary, a gesture that had made her feel like a person whose name could live in footnotes. It gave her the right to attend and to be ignored. She wore a dark dress, flats, hair back. She could have been a junior associate sent to take notes. Except she was carrying a folder, and in the folder was the chain of custody log from the clinic, and Raphael's compilation of tapes and subcontractor invoices, and a statement from Nurse Meyer, typed carefully in her own words. A man in a Helix jacket asked how paternity tests were handled. I said, we don't do that here. He asked about amniotic fluid. I said he should talk to the lab. I recorded the time. The receptionist blinked when Lena introduced herself. I'm here for the board meeting. Are you... A shareholder, Lena said gently. Here's my proxy. They let her in. The room smelled like lemon oil and too much money. Graham looked up, startled. He hid it. Riley didn't bother to hide his displeasure. It settled on his face like a mask. Victoria, sitting near the end of the table, crossed her legs with the same grace she'd used to host governors. Her eyes softened by a fraction when she saw Lena. It might have been an apology, or a memory. The meeting began as meetings do, minutes, motions, votes that felt inevitable. Lena waited until the chair asked if there was any new business. Yes, Lena said. Her voice was steady. I have something to enter into the record. Graham tensed. This isn't appropriate. It's entirely appropriate, said a man at the far end of the table, a director who had founded a national grocery chain and knew about messes. Let the shareholder speak. Lena stepped forward and placed the folder in front of the corporate secretary. I believe my husband, she didn't look at Graham, filed for divorce on the basis of a rumor supported by a compromised process. I believe the rumor was encouraged by a person in this room. I believe the person who encouraged it did so to consolidate power in advance of an IPO. Riley laughed, a little high. This is defamatory. What's defamatory? Lena said. Is telling a mother her daughter isn't her husband's because you misused a lab you had no business contacting. Victoria exhaled, low. Graham stood. Lena. She faced him. In the quiet of her body, something she hadn't had time to name settled into place. She didn't want revenge. She wanted the truth out where it could breathe. These, she said, indicating the documents, are records and statements that show someone associated with Helix tried to inquire about prenatal samples and chain of custody at the hospital where I delivered. These are invoices that show Helix paid a vendor who cloned my phone the week a series of incriminating texts were sent from it. She paused. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a cop, but I'm a mother, and I know hunger when I see it. Someone wanted to eat everything. Silence. The board chair cleared his throat. We will review these materials and respond appropriately. You'll want to do it fast, Lena said, softer now. Because if you don't, I will. Not for my sake. I'll be fine. But for her. She nodded to the small photo tucked into the folder's pocket, a snapshot Priya had taken of Isla asleep, mouth open, fists determined. She deserves a world where truth isn't something men with badges decide matters or not. Lena left the folder. She left the room. In the elevator, she allowed herself to shake. In the lobby, she leaned against a column and laughed once, the sound surprised from her. When she stepped onto the sidewalk, she felt 10 pounds lighter. Her phone buzzed. A text from Anna. DNA results are in. Call me. They met at Anna's office because bad news, even when it isn't yours, sounds better when it bounces off law books. Anna closed the door and sat. 99.99% probability, she said. Graham is the biological father. Lena blew out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Okay. Anna watched her. You're allowed to smile. Lena did. Small and fierce. It felt like stepping into sunlight after weeks indoors. What now? We file the result, Anna said. We demand an immediate withdrawal of the petition under the stated grounds, and we update the temporary orders for access and support. If they refuse, we request sanctions. The door cracked open. Priya slid in with coffee like a rescue boat. Tell me we're winning. We're winning, Anna said. Lena nodded, then frowned. I don't want money. Priya blinked. What? I know we need practicalities. Diapers don't pay for themselves. But I don't want to be paid for paying a roomer rented in my house. I want... Lena trailed off. The shape of it came into focus as she spoke. I want to tell the truth. And then I want to build something. Build what? Anna asked, wary and interested. A fund, Lena said. For NICU families. For women who get served at the worst moment of their lives. For people who can't hire Ana Velasquez and Rafael Quintero and who don't have a Priya to make dal at midnight. Priya's eyes watered. That's very you, she said. Annoyingly good, but yes, Anna considered. Strategically, declining spousal support and asking that funds be directed to a foundation in your child's name would land like thunder. It's the opposite of the story they're telling. Exactly, Lena said. I don't want to own him. I want to own my choices. That afternoon, the board of Helix announced the postponement of the vote to elevate Riley. A terse statement cited, new information requiring review. The market shrugged, then tilted, then righted itself. In Medina, Victoria called and left a message on Lena's phone. Come to the house, please. Her voice was tired in a way that admitted a lifetime of pretending not to be. Lena went. The house was the same. Glass, lake, furniture that had never quite surrendered to the idea of being used. Victoria met her at the door, hugged her, then pulled back with a surprising kind of self-consciousness. I was cruel, Victoria said without preamble. I told myself I was being prudent, but I was cruel. Lena had never seen her like this. Unvarnished, shoulders not arranged for a photograph. Why? Lena asked softly. Why did you believe the worst? Victoria looked out at the lake, the horizon a hard line against sky. Because I hated the feeling of not being needed. Because you made my son soft in ways I didn't recognize. And then I confused softness with danger. She shook her head. Because Riley has always known how to speak to men like Graham, and I mistook fluency for truth. Graham? Lena asked. In his office, Victoria said. He hasn't slept. They found him with the curtains closed and the chair turned to face the glass, as if darkness could help him see. He stood when they entered, then sat again as if his legs had decided they had done enough. I saw the board, he said, his voice a scrape of rock. I saw what you brought. I didn't know about the phone. I didn't know about the hospital. He pushed a hand through his hair. I thought I was protecting us. You set us on fire, Lena said, not unkindly. He swallowed. The test, I got the call. I did too, Lena said. I'm sorry, he said. The words were awkward in his mouth, as if they'd been learned too late. I am so... He stopped, revised. I did this. I let fear drive. I let people around me hold the wheel. I would like... He exhaled. I would like to tell the truth publicly. Lena nodded. Good. And I would like to try to... He stopped again, this time with something like a sense of grace. No, I would like to co-parent Isla in a way that makes her proud of both of us. That starts with telling the truth. Lena stood there, watching a man who had always known how to sell a future practice stating a present. It looked like honesty. It looked like a first draft of a different life for both of them. Okay, she said. Here's what you're going to do. The press conference was held in a small room at a downtown hotel whose ballrooms had hosted victories and admission of losses for a century. The podium was plain. The backdrop was a drape that didn't try too hard. Cameras lined the back like city birds. People expected fury. People expected fire. Lena walked out in a blue dress the color of good sky. She didn't bring Isla. The baby slept somewhere safe with Priya and a playlist Maya had made. But she carried a photograph. Graham stood to the side, hands clasped, not performing contrition, just standing like a man who had learned the weight of his own hands. Victoria sat in the second row. Anna stood near a pillar like an anchor with good hair. Raphael leaned against the back wall, invisible to everyone who didn't know what to look for. Lena adjusted the microphone. The room hushed. My name is Lena Morales Ashford, she said. 4 days ago I had a baby. Her name is Isla. She is small and very loud. The day she was born, a stranger delivered divorce papers to my hospital room because rumors about her paternity had been seeded, watered, and harvested. She paused. She did not look at Graham. Today I want to tell you 3 things. First, my daughter is my husband's child. It is 99.99% certain and 100% true. Second, the rumor was not an accident. There is evidence that people with access to my home and to my devices tampered with them and attempted to influence hospital protocols. The appropriate reviews are underway. Third, I am not here to crucify anyone. I am here to show you what a woman can do when she refuses to let fear have the steering wheel. A murmur, a cough. The cameras were very still. I am not seeking alimony, she said. I am not seeking to punish anyone. I am asking that the amount I would have received be diverted to a foundation that starts today, the Isla Fund. It will pay for rides to hospitals and hotel rooms near NICUs and legal advice for people who need a voice in rooms built to make them feel small. It will be transparent. It will be boring in the way all good things are. And it will be the story we tell our daughter about the day she was born. There it was. The thing that left the room stunned. Not a spectacle. Not vengeance. A decision. Graham stepped to the podium when she finished. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't apologize like an influencer. He said, I believed a false story because it let me escape my own fear. I served my wife papers in a hospital room. I asked a judge to put my suspicions above our daughter's first breath. I was wrong. Lena asked me to tell the truth, so I am telling it. The paternity test is positive. We are withdrawing the petition as filed and recommitting to co-parenting with respect. I will match the Isla Fund's first $10 million from my personal assets. A journalist asked whether Helix was involved. Graham glanced at the board's counsel and said, An internal review is ongoing. Another asked Lena whether she forgave him. Lena considered the question like it was a bird she could not name. Forgiveness is not a tweet, she said. It's a practice. Today I am practicing the part where I choose what to build instead of what to burn. They left the stage to a flutter that wasn't quite applause and wasn't quite shock. In the hallway, Victoria reached for Lena's hand. I will put my name on it too, she said, voice hoarse. The fund. Let me help make it boring. Lena squeezed back. Okay, she said, but no peonies. They're cursed. Victoria laughed, and to her credit didn't cry. That evening, donations began to land like rain. Small, then larger, then steady. Nurses sent $20. A retired judge sent $500. An anonymous deposit of $2 million came with a note. For the women served in the wrong rooms. When Priya texted the screenshot, Lena sat on the apartment floor and wept the steady, grateful kind. She had expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she felt repaired. Not fully. Nothing was that easy. But there was a seam where there hadn't been one, and it held. Riley resigned before he could be fired. The press release cited an opportunity to pursue other ventures. The board's internal review became an external investigation. The vendor who had cloned Lena's phone shuttered its website in a hurry. A lab employee lawyered up. The city, which has always loved the smell of scandal when it drifts from the rich, turned its head for a moment and then, as cities do, moved on. Graham started therapy and didn't tweet about it. He began showing up to Priya's apartment every morning at 9 with coffee and a respect that took the shape of silence. He changed diapers. He learned Isla's patterns. He apologized without asking for absolution. He asked to attend the Foundation's first board meeting and sat quietly, taking notes like an intern. When a reporter asked him if he was trying to win his wife back, he said, "No, I am trying to be the kind of father who doesn't make his daughter do that work for him." Victoria invited Maya to lunch and listened to her talk about hospital corridors and accumulated unkindness and the relief of being allowed to decide people weren't one thing. Then she wrote a check with zeros that made the fund's treasurer blink and asked for a volunteer orientation packet. Raphael returned to his small office, closed the file, and because he was a romantic in an unromantic line of work, sent a baby blanket knit by his sister. Anna called the Foundation's accountant twice a week for the first month, and exactly once a week thereafter. The bylaws were short, sensible, and unapologetically dull. Lena moved through days that were all milk and paperwork, and the kind of exhaustion that feels like a watermark. She learned to swaddle and to draft policy. She learned to say, "No comment," and to mean it. She learned to name the thing she was feeling. Not rage, not victory, agency. The divorce? They rewrote it. They didn't pretend the wound wasn't there. They cleaned it properly. After the mandatory waiting period, they filed a new petition together, this time uncontested, styled as a petition for legal separation with parenting plan rather than an immediate dissolution. It gave them room. On a soft October morning, they met at the park near the apartment. The leaves had finally committed to turning. Graham held Isla, who stared at a dog like she had invented the concept. "Do you ever—" Graham began, then restarted. "What will you tell her about us?" "The truth," Lena said. "That we loved each other, and then we hurt each other, and then we tried to make something good out of it. That I didn't abandon myself. That you didn't either. That there were people who helped. That she was worth all of it." She smiled. "That she had a nurse named Maya who made playlists like recipes." He laughed. "And a friend named Priya who threatened anyone who tried to talk to you before coffee. And a lawyer who wore flats like armor. And a grandmother who learned to apologize." They sat for a while, two people who had learned to breathe separately in a world that kept trying to make them share a single lung. When it was time to go, Graham handed Isla back to Lena with care that didn't perform itself, and Lena realized she wasn't waiting for him to fail anymore. She was building, and he was building, and sometimes the buildings would stand on different streets and still be part of the same city. That night, Lena stood at the apartment window and watched Capitol Hill do what it always does. Flirt with rain. Keep the secrets it was never really given. She thought about the dock at Medina and the road it had become in her dream. She thought about the folder on the hospital bed and the way the word served had reshaped itself into something she could use. She thought about opening her phone to find an email from a woman in Ohio who'd written, "He served me in chemo. Today I asked our hospital for a social worker. Your fund will pay for the Uber," they said. I felt not small. "Thank you." Lena pressed Isla's warm weight against her shoulder and whispered, "You are a person who changes the angle of a room." Isla yawned, then made a fist with the seriousness of the very new. Lena laughed softly, and in the laugh, found the sound of herself again. On the mantel, next to the picture of Isla asleep with her mouth open, lay a small piece of paper from the press conference where they'd set out a sign-up clipboard. On it, in Raphael's careful hand, someone had written, "What she did next was boring, which is how you know it was brave." Lena liked that. She liked that very much. And in the deep hours, when the city's neon was a heartbeat at the edge of the blinds and the apartment was a boat on a quiet lake, Lena slept without dreaming of doors opening she couldn't close. If Lena and Isla's story of betrayal, power, and quiet courage stirred something in you, help it travel. Like, share and subscribe so more people find their way to stories that honor complexity and hope. Drop a comment about the moment you felt the shift, from anger to agency, from rumor to truth. If you know someone navigating a hard season, pass this along. Sometimes a story is the first handhold out of a dark place. And if you want more cinematic, grounded narratives like this, where characters choose what to build instead of what to burn, tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. Your engagement helps us keep making work that believes in redemption without pretending it's easy. The crystal chandeliers of the Pierre's grand ballroom glittered, casting judgment on the hundreds of millionaires below. Among them, Marcus Bishop, a titan of industry, smirked as his wife, Clara, approached the stage. He had just donated $250,000 to thunderous applause. Now, his quiet, unassuming wife was presenting her own gift. She held no giant check, only a small, framed drawing. Marcus threw his head back and laughed, a sound that cut through the orchestra. "My wife, the artist," he boomed. "What's the starting bid? $50? The crowd tittered, and his wife froze. But Marcus, blinded by arrogance, had just made the mistake of his life. He mocked her gift, not knowing that the simple frame held the key to a secret worth millions and the power to destroy his entire world. The air in the penthouse was pressurized, thin, and heavy with the scent of Marcus Bishop's imported cologne. From their vantage point, 60 floors above Central Park, the city lights seemed to glitter just for him. Marcus adjusted the silk lapels of his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his reflection staring back at him from the floor-to-ceiling glass. Sharp, relentless, a conqueror. His wife, Clara, was a muted counterpoint to his stark brilliance. She stood by the window, her back to him, clad in a simple, elegant midnight blue gown that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. "Is the car ready, Robert?" Marcus snapped into his phone, not looking at his wife. "Good. Tell him if he's a minute late, he's fired." He ended the call and tossed the $5,000 device onto a marble table with careless force. "You seem tense, Marcus," Clara said, her voice soft. "Tense. I'm focused." He rounded on her, his eyes scanning her critically. "The legacy ball isn't just a party, Clara. It's the entire fourth quarter.
Every major player in New York finance will be there. Sterling will be there. Ah, Mr. Sterling. The name had hung in their apartment for weeks. William Sterling, the last of the old money holdouts, controlled a logistics empire Marcus desperately needed to acquire to finalize his dominance of the East Coast shipping lanes. "My donation is ready," Marcus said, tapping a pristine white envelope on the table. Inside was a check for $250,000. "It's the perfect amount, enough to make the front page of the society pages, not so much that it looks desperate." He looked at her, his gaze landing on the simple leather portfolio she held at her side. "What is that?" "My contribution," Clara said quietly, her hand tightening on the worn burgundy leather. Marcus let out a short, barking laugh. "Your contribution? What did you do? Sell one of your little watercolors at that community fair? What's in there? $500? "It's something I've been working on," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "Clara, honestly," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just let me handle the donations. It's complicated. It's about optics, about posturing. It's not about art projects." He waved a dismissive hand. "Why couldn't you just donate that hideous emerald necklace your grandmother left you, the one I told you to sell? That, at least, has a price tag someone can understand." Clara's face tightened, but only for a second. The necklace had been her grandmother's, a woman who had raised her, a woman who had believed in her quiet strength. "I wanted to give something personal." "Personal doesn't get you a meeting with William Sterling," Marcus shot back. "Personal doesn't get your name engraved on the new hospital wing. Money does. My money." He grabbed the $250,000 check and slid it into his inner pocket. "Just try to look impressed when they announce my name. And for God's sake, when Sterling comes over, don't talk about your art program. Talk about the market. Talk about my achievements." Clara watched him. She saw the man she had married, or at least the man she thought she had married, buried deep beneath this glittering, desperate shell. He was a man terrified of being seen as new money, a man who measured his worth in headlines and stock tickers. He had started with nothing, a fact he was both proud of and deeply ashamed of. He wanted the approval of men like Sterling, men who had never known a day of want, and he was willing to bulldoze anyone, including his own wife, to get it. "You're right, Marcus," she said, the words smooth and cold. "It is an important night. Good. You're learning." He nodded, satisfied. He checked his Patek Philippe watch. "It's time. Robert is waiting." He strode out of the penthouse, expecting her to follow in his wake like a dutiful shadow. Clara paused, taking one last look at the city. She opened her portfolio and stared at the simple, framed ink drawing inside. It was a minimalist sketch of a hummingbird, its wings a blur of motion as it fed a tiny, waiting chick. It was simple. It was personal. And it was, she knew, the most powerful thing in the room. She closed the portfolio, the soft thud of the leather cover sealing her resolve. Then she walked out of the apartment, a silent soldier heading into a battle her husband didn't even know she was fighting. The arrival at the Pierre was a sensory assault. A canyon of black town cars and limousines emptied a river of diamonds, silk and ambition onto the red carpet. Flashbulbs exploded like miniature suns, the shouts of paparazzi forming a chaotic, roaring wave. "Mr. Bishop, over here! Mr. Bishop!" Marcus was in his element. He emerged from the Rolls-Royce, his smile wide and white, a practiced mask of relaxed power. He extended a hand to Clara, pulling her into the spotlight beside him. She blinked, her natural modesty shrinking from the aggressive glare of the cameras. "Marcus, "Who are you wearing?" one reporter yelled. "Tom Ford," Marcus replied, projecting. "And my beautiful wife, Clara, is in, well, she's in blue." He gave her a tight, proprietary squeeze. "She's my secret weapon." Clara smiled weakly. The dress was a custom design by a young, unknown artist she was patronizing. It had cost a fraction of the other gowns on the carpet, but that was a secret she kept for herself. "Mr. Bishop, is it true you're making a play for Sterling Logistics?" a more serious reporter from the Wall Street Journal called out. Marcus's smile tightened. "Tonight is about the children, Gerald. We're here for the New York Children's Health Foundation." "But," he added with a conspiratorial wink, "a healthy city needs healthy business." As they moved through the gauntlet, a different figure stepped into their path. He was tall, with a relaxed, aristocratic posture that Marcus, for all his money, could never quite emulate. Julian Vance. His family had owned half of downtown for a century. He was Marcus's direct competitor for the Sterling acquisition, and he operated with an old money smoothness that drove Marcus insane. "Marcus," Julian said, his voice a polite, velvety baritone. "Good to see you." "Vance," Marcus replied, his tone clipped. Julian's gaze shifted to Clara, and his entire demeanor softened. "Clara, you look absolutely lovely. That blue is stunning." Unlike Marcus, Julian knew quality. "Is that one of Maria Esteban's pieces?" Clara brightened, genuinely surprised. "Yes, it is. I didn't think anyone would recognize her work. I'm on the board of the New Designers Guild. Her work is exceptional," Julian said warmly. "I heard your community art center just got its state grant. Congratulations. That's a massive win for those kids." Marcus bristled. He hated when people talked to Clara about her little projects. It distracted from the main event, him. "We really must be going, Vance. Big night. Big donations." Julian's smile was knowing. "Of course. I'm sure you'll make quite the splash, Marcus. You always do." He nodded politely to Clara. "A pleasure, as always, Clara." As they walked away, Marcus leaned in, his voice a low hiss. "What was that?" "Flirting with him right in front of me." "He was being polite, Marcus. He knows the designer," Clara said, her brief moment of pleasure evaporating. "He was undermining me. He talks about your tiny art center to make my business look crass. It's a power move, Clara. You're too naive to see it." They entered the grand ballroom. It was a masterpiece of opulence. The ceiling soared, dripping with crystal. Thousands of white orchids and roses formed towering centerpieces. An orchestra played softly, a subtle soundtrack to the murmur of $1 billion exchanging pleasantries. Clara spotted Isabella Montgomery, the city's most feared and respected society columnist, holding court near the entrance. Isabella's pen could make or break a reputation. She wasn't just a gossip columnist. She was a cultural critic. Her eyes met Clara's, and she offered a small, respectful nod before her gaze slid to Marcus, becoming instantly cooler, more appraising. The head of the charity, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman with a kind face and exhausted eyes, was shaking hands, thanking donors. Marcus bypassed her, making a direct line for the bar, where William Sterling was nursing a glass of scotch. "William, marvelous event, isn't it?" Marcus boomed, clapping the older man on the back. Sterling, a silver-haired man with a face like carved granite, barely flinched. "Bishop, good of you to come." His eyes flickered to Clara. "Mrs. Bishop." "Mr. Sterling," Clara said, with a polite nod. "My wife was just saying how much we admire the work of the foundation," Marcus ploughed on. "In fact, we're planning a significant contribution tonight." "Significant?" Sterling took a slow sip of his scotch. "Are you now? That's admirable." His gaze lingered on Clara, who was watching Dr. Reed greet a family from the children's hospital. There was a genuine, unguarded warmth in Clara's expression that Sterling noted. "Indeed. It's all about giving back," Marcus said, motioning for a waiter to bring him a glass of champagne. "It's the cornerstone of my business philosophy." "Is it?" Sterling said, his voice dry. "I was under the impression your philosophy was acquire at all costs. Excuse me. I see Dr. Reed is free." Sterling moved away, leaving Marcus flat-footed. The older man walked directly to Dr. Reed, but on the way he paused, stopping directly in front of Clara. "Mrs. Bishop," he said, his voice lower, more personal. "I read about your grandmother's estate last year. My condolences. She was a formidable woman, a true philanthropist, back when the word meant more than a tax write-off." Clara was stunned. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. That's very kind of you to say. She would be proud of the work you're doing at your art center," he said. Then, with a curt nod, he moved on, leaving Clara standing in the swirling chaos of the gala, her husband's angry glare boring into her back from across the room. The dinner was a blur of exquisite food and calculated conversation. Marcus, still smarting from Sterling's rebuff, spent the entire meal loudly detailing his recent market victories to the unfortunate banking couple seated next to them. Clara ate sparingly, her attention fixed on the stage where the main event was about to begin. Her heart was a trapped bird in her chest. Finally, the auctioneer, Charles Harrison, a man with a booming voice and a merciless gavel, took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome," he began. "Your generosity tonight will fund 3 new pediatric surgical suites, so let's be very generous." The auction began. A week on a private yacht in Greece sold for $80,000. A Picasso sketch went for $150,000. A private concert with a rock legend hit $200,000. The room was electric with the thrill of competitive giving. Marcus bid on a few items, making sure to lose to someone slightly more important, a practiced move of feigned humility. After the main auction items were gone, Charles Harrison shifted his tone. "And now we come to the patron gifts, the donations given not for sport, but from the heart. First, a truly incredible gesture from a man who defines New York business, Mr. Marcus Bishop." The spotlight swung to their table. Marcus stood, basking in it. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket, pulled the white envelope from his pocket, and strode to the stage. He handed the check to Dr. Reed with a flourish, shaking her hand firmly and holding it for the cameras. "Mr. Bishop has donated," Charles boomed, "$250,000. The ballroom erupted. It was a massive sum. Marcus beamed, kissed Dr. Reed on the cheek, and took the microphone. "Thank you. We must support these children. The Bishop family is proud to do its part." He looked directly at William Sterling as he said it. He returned to the table to a chorus of "Congratulations, Marcus," and "Incredible." He sat down, flushed with victory, and gave Clara's knee a possessive squeeze. "See, that's how you do it." Charles Harrison waited for the applause to die down. "Thank you, Mr. Bishop, for that stunning start. Our next patron gift comes from Mrs. Clara Bishop." The spotlight swung back, landing this time on Clara. A confused murmur rippled through the room. Another gift? From the same family? Clara stood. Her hands were trembling, but her back was straight. She picked up the simple burgundy leather portfolio and made the long, lonely walk to the stage. She didn't look at Marcus. She kept her eyes on Dr. Reed, who gave her a small, encouraging smile. She reached the stage, and, instead of handing over a check, she opened the portfolio. She extracted a simple, black-framed piece. It was her ink drawing of the hummingbird and its chick. It was perhaps 12 inches square. She handed it to Charles Harrison. A profound, awkward silence fell over the grand ballroom. The orchestra, unsure of its cue, fumbled a few notes and went silent. Charles Harrison held the small frame, looking at it with visible confusion. He looked at Dr. Reed, who nodded firmly. From the table, Marcus's voice, amplified by his rage and the sudden quiet, cut through the air like a knife. He was laughing. It was not a pleasant sound. It was sharp, cruel, and laced with genuine horrified embarrassment. "My wife, the artist!" he boomed, standing up so everyone could see him. He too thought this was a mistake. He thought she was making a fool of him. "She's donated one of her doodles. Charles, what's the starting bid? $50? Do I hear 50? The room exploded. Not with applause, but with a horrifying wave of titters, shocked gasps, and nervous laughter. People looked at each other, mortified for her. Clara stood frozen in the spotlight, her face a mask of pale composure, though inside her world was shattering. She had expected him to be dismissive in private. Not this. Not public execution. Isabella Montgomery, the columnist, was scribbling furiously in her notebook, her expression one of utter, cold disgust. Julian Vance, at a nearby table, looked like he was about to stand up, his fists clenched. William Sterling simply watched Marcus, his face impassive, his eyes missing nothing. "A little joke, folks," Marcus tried to cover, seeing the tide of opinion turn from humor to horror. "A little joke. She's got a big heart. Obviously the Bishop family's real contribution is the $250,000 I just gave." He gestured for her to come down, to get off the stage, to end this humiliation. But Clara didn't move. She didn't look at her husband. She looked at Dr. Reed. Dr. Reed stepped forward, her hand shaking slightly, and took the microphone from a stunned Charles Harrison. The room fell silent once more, waiting for the apology, for the end of this excruciating social train wreck. "Thank you, Marcus, for that clarification." Dr. Reed's voice was steady, but there was a new, hard edge to it. She put a supportive hand on Clara's back, a small gesture of solidarity that was not lost on the crowd. Clara, still pale, returned to her table. The walk back was 100 times longer than the walk to the stage. She could feel every eye on her, a physical weight of pity and second-hand shame. When she sat down, Marcus leaned in, his face a mask of crimson fury, his smile still stapled on for the benefit of the room. "What in God's name was that?" he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper beneath the renewed murmur of the crowd. "Are you insane? You made me look like a fool. A $50 doodle?" "It wasn't a joke, Marcus," Clara said, her voice barely audible. "You've humiliated me. You've humiliated this family." "Mr. Bishop," a voice interrupted. It was William Sterling. He was standing over their table, his expression unreadable. "William," Marcus said, instantly shifting, his desperate smile returning. "Just a little misunderstanding. My wife, I wasn't speaking to you, Bishop," Sterling said, his voice cutting. His eyes were on Clara. "Mrs. Bishop, your grandmother would have been appalled by that display. Not by you. By him." He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked, not back to his table, but toward the exit of the ballroom. Marcus watched him go, his mouth half open, the blood draining from his face. The Sterling deal wasn't just shaky. It was gone. It had just walked out the door. "You," Marcus whispered, his entire body trembling with rage. "You did this." Before Clara could respond, another figure arrived, Isabella Montgomery. She too ignored Marcus, pulling a chair over and sitting beside Clara. That was the most disgusting display of public arrogance I've seen in 20 years of covering this town, Clara, Isabella said, her voice low and fast. I'm changing my column. Tonight's headline was supposed to be about Marcus Bishop's generous donation. It's now about his public joke. Please, Isabella, don't, Clara whispered, horrified. Don't? My dear, he just handed me the story of the season on a silver platter, Isabella said, her eyes flashing. The question is, why did you do it? Why that drawing? From the other side, Julian Vance appeared. Clara, are you all right? Marcus, you are a cad of the first order. Stay out of my family business, Vance, Marcus snapped, finally finding his voice. It stopped being family business when you broadcast it to 500 people, Bishop, Julian retorted. The entire event was collapsing. The focus of the night was no longer on the charity, but on the spectacular implosion of Table 1. On stage, Dr. Evelyn Reed was in a hushed, frantic conference with Charles Harrison. The auctioneer looked baffled, pointing at the small drawing in his hand, then at his clipboard. Dr. Reed was nodding, her expression growing more and more determined. She grabbed the clipboard, marched back to the microphone, and tapped it loudly. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention again. Her voice cracked with an emotion that wasn't embarrassment. It was excitement. The room, already buzzing about the drama, fell quiet again. Marcus slumped in his chair. Oh God, she's going to apologize for her. This is the end. We seem to have had, Dr. Reed began, a small, bright smile appearing on her face. A rather significant misunderstanding regarding Mrs. Bishop's donation. Marcus covered his face with his hands. Mr. Harrison, Dr. Reed continued, was working from an older list. He, and apparently Mr. Bishop, were not aware of the true nature of Clara's gift. The spotlight hit Marcus again. He looked up, trapped, his face a picture of pure panic. He looked at Clara, but she was watching the stage, her expression now calm, her hands perfectly still in her lap. She knew what was coming. This, she realized, was the moment. The rest of her life would be defined by the next 30 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Evelyn Reed said, her voice ringing with a newfound, joyous power. I need to correct the record. Mrs. Clara Bishop's donation tonight was not this drawing. Marcus let out a huge, shaky sigh of relief. He started to laugh, looking around the table. See? A mistake, just a simple mistake. She probably left the check in the car, honey, didn't you? Please let me finish, Mr. Bishop, Dr. Reed said, her smile not reaching her eyes. The room was utterly silent. This drawing, she continued, holding up the small frame, is not the donation. It is the symbol of the donation. It is, in fact, the dedication plaque. The confusion in the ballroom was palpable. People were leaning forward, straining to understand. Dr. Reed nodded to the technician's booth. The massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been showing a logo for the foundation, suddenly flickered. The small, simple ink drawing of the hummingbird and its chick appeared, filling the 10-foot screens. This is the Hummingbird, by Clara Bishop, Dr. Reed explained. Then the image on the screen dissolved. It faded into a stunning, state-of-the-art architectural rendering. It was a beautiful, 3-story glass and steel structure, modern but warm, connected to the main children's hospital. Bold, elegant letters were superimposed over the entrance. The Clara Bishop Wing for Pediatric Oncology. A collective, audible gasp swept the room. It was not a donation. It was a building. Marcus Bishop went from white to a sickly, mottled grey. His jaw was slack. He looked at the screen, at his wife's name, and then at his wife. Clara was just sitting there, watching the rendering of the building she had spent a year planning. Dr. Reed's voice was thick with emotion. For the past 18 months, Clara Bishop has been working anonymously with my team and with the architects at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. She has been liquidating a private trust established by her late grandmother to fund, in its entirety, the construction and outfitting of this new wing. Dr. Reed paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. We at the hospital are stunned. We were sworn to secrecy until tonight. The project was finalized this afternoon. Mrs. Clara Bishop, through her own personal philanthropy, has just made a donation to the New York Children's Health Foundation, valued at... She took a deep breath, locking eyes with Marcus. $1,500,000. For a full 10 seconds there was no sound. There was only the image of the building on the screen and the sight of Marcus Bishop, frozen, a statue of his own ruined pride. Then, from the back, Julian Vance stood up. He didn't just clap, he applauded, his hands raised high. "Brava, Clara!" he shouted. His voice broke the spell. As one, the entire ballroom, the bankers, the old money, the new money, the doctors and the philanthropists, rose to their feet. The sound was deafening. It was not the polite, obligatory applause for Marcus's check. It was a thunderous, genuine, overwhelming roar of acclamation. Dr. Reed, her eyes shining with tears, walked off the stage and directly to Clara. She took her hand. "Clara, please, come up." Clara, trembling, allowed herself to be led back to the stage, back into the spotlight that she had just stood in, humiliated. But this time, it felt different. It was a warm, welcoming light. The ovation went on and on. Dr. Reed handed her the microphone. Clara looked out at the sea of faces, all looking at her with awe, respect, and, from many, apology. She found Marcus in the crowd. He was still sitting, a lone, dark figure in a sea of standing admirers. His face was unreadable, a mask of pure, distilled shock. Clara cleared her throat. The room fell instantly silent. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, yet it carried to every corner. My grandmother. She always told me that true charity isn't about the name on the check, it's about the need. She loved hummingbirds. They are so small, but they are miracles of strength. They can fly backwards, they can hover, they can travel thousands of miles. She looked at the drawing on the screen. I wanted this wing. I wanted it to be a place where the smallest patients, the children fighting the biggest battles, could find their own strength. A place where they, too, could perform miracles. She smiled, a true, radiant smile. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. The applause that followed was even greater. The night was hers. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, as Clara was swarmed on stage by well-wishers, doctors, board members and old money matriarchs who had never given her a second glance. The press descended on Marcus. The Wall Street Journal reporter, Gerald, was the first, his phone recording. Mr. Bishop, an incredible donation. Did you know about your wife's plan?" Marcus was trapped. He couldn't move. He tried to compose his face into a mask of proud husband, but the shock and fury were too raw. "Of course," he choked out. "The Bishop family, we've been planning this for some time." "But you mocked her, sir," a reporter from the Post interjected, her voice sharp. "We all heard it. You offered $50 for her doodle." "That was a private joke between us," Marcus stammered, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape. "A term of endearment. I wanted her to have her own moment." No one was buying it. The flashing bulbs were no longer friendly. They were prosecutorial. Isabella Montgomery walked slowly past his table. She didn't stop, but she spoke as she passed, her voice dripping with ice. Headline updated, Marcus. The Hummingbird's Million. Clara Bishop eclipses husband in night of stunning philanthropy. Subhead. Husband Marcus asks, $50 for that? Isabella, wait, he pleaded. But she was gone, heading for the exit, no doubt to file her story immediately. Julian Vance passed by next, not to gloat, but to deliver a final verdict. You know, Marcus, he said conversationally, I've been trying to figure out how to beat you for the Sterling deal. Turns out I didn't have to do a thing. You just imploded. What are you talking about? Marcus snarled. I was at the bar when Sterling left. He was on the phone with his COO. I heard him say, scrap the Bishop proposal. I won't do business with a man who doesn't recognize the value of his own assets. Get me Vance's file in the morning. Julian shrugged. He wasn't talking about shipping, Marcus. He was talking about Clara. Good night, Bishop, and congratulations to your wife. Julian walked away, leaving Marcus in the ruins of his own making. The $250,000 check, which had seemed so monumental an hour ago, was now a laughable pittance. It was the price tag of his own arrogance. He had tried to buy respect, while his wife had quietly, powerfully earned it. He had lost the Sterling deal. He had lost the respect of his peers. And as he watched his wife, surrounded, radiant, and completely independent of him, he realized he had lost her, too. He had just never known he'd had her to begin with. The rest of the evening was a new kind of torture. He was a pariah at his own table. People avoided his gaze. The few who did speak to him offered strained congratulations for Clara, their eyes full of pity and contempt for him. He was a ghost at the feast, a walking cautionary tale. Finally, Clara extricated herself from the crowd. Her face was flushed with emotion, but as she approached the table, her expression settled into one of calm, weary resolution. She looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. And he saw no anger. He saw no triumph. He saw only finality. The car is ready, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She picked up her simple cloth wrap and the empty burgundy portfolio. She didn't wait for him. She simply turned and walked away, past the bowing staff, past the whispering onlookers, and out of the grand ballroom. Marcus sat alone for another full minute, the noise of the party roaring back to life around him, a celebration he was no longer a part of. He slowly, stiffly, stood up and followed his wife, the longest walk of his life. The ride back to the penthouse in the Rolls-Royce was a tomb of suffocating silence. The city lights, which had seemed like a tribute to Marcus on the way there, now felt like millions of tiny, mocking eyes. He sat pressed against his door, as far from Clara as the plush leather seat would allow. Clara simply stared out her window, watching the blur of Park Avenue. She looked peaceful. It was this peace that finally broke him. The elevator ride-up was just as silent. The ding of their arrival at the penthouse floor sounded like a gunshot. The moment the heavy oak doors closed behind them, sealing them in their glass box in the sky, Marcus exploded. You planned that! His voice was a ragged howl. You planned all of it! You stood there and you made me a fool! Clara calmly placed her portfolio on the marble table. She turned to face him, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. No, Marcus, she said, her voice devoid of its earlier softness. It was now made of steel. You made yourself a fool. I gave you every opportunity to be a partner. I tried to tell you I had a contribution. You told me it was a doodle before you even saw it. You told me to sell my grandmother's necklace. You You lied to me, he sputtered. Where did you even get that kind of money? My money? Did you steal from my accounts? A small, sad laugh escaped Clara's lips. You really don't listen, do you? It was my grandmother's estate, the inheritance you told me to roll into your tech fund and not worry my pretty little head about. I never signed those papers. I liquidated the portfolio 6 months ago. I've been working with Dr. Reed and the architects ever since. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a long-conceived, meticulously executed plan that she had hidden from him for over a year. He, the great negotiator, the titan who saw every angle, had been completely blindsided by his own wife. You cost me the sterling deal, he whispered, the rage giving way to a hollow, echoing dread. My sterling deal. It's gone. Vance got it. All because of you. No, Clara said, walking past him toward her study. It's gone because of you. Mr. Sterling saw who you are. He saw a man who values a price tag more than a person. He saw a man who would publicly humiliate his own wife to make himself look big. He was right. You didn't just mock my gift, Marcus. You mocked me, and you've been doing it for 10 years. He saw it all slipping away. The deal, the reputation, the perfect life he'd built. He panicked. Clara, wait, he said, his voice changing, becoming desperate, pleading. Wait, we can fix this, we can. We'll put out a joint statement in the morning, a press release. We'll say it was a planned surprise. The Bishop family's $2 million night. We'll double my donation. Yes, we'll call it the Marcus and Clara Bishop Wing. He reached out to grab her arm, but she sidestepped him. She had her hand on the doorknob of her study. No, Marcus, she said, and her voice was so final, so utterly finished, that it made him freeze. It's the Clara Bishop Wing. My name. My gift. My grandmother's legacy. You taught me something very important tonight. You taught me that my name is the only one I can truly rely on. Clara, don't do this. Don't be this way. Good night, Marcus. She opened the door to her study, walked inside, and closed it behind her. The click of the lock settling into place was the loudest sound he had ever heard. It was the sound of his entire world ending. He was left alone in the cold, cavernous penthouse, a king with no kingdom, a husband with no wife, staring at the reflection of a man he didn't even recognize. Sunrise over Manhattan was a brutal, accusatory thing. It spilled across the acres of polished marble in the penthouse, painting the room in hues of cold blue and fiery orange. The light illuminated the remnants of the night. A single, abandoned glass of scotch on the bar, its contents stale. A crumpled tuxedo jacket thrown over a $1,000 chair. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant, mournful wail of a siren rising from the streets 60 floors below. Marcus Bishop had not slept. He stood at the same floor-to-ceiling window where his wife had stood just hours before. He was still in his tuxedo trousers and unbuttoned shirt, the silk tie hanging undone like a noose around his neck. He stared at his own reflection, a haggard, red-eyed stranger staring back. He had spent the night in a feverish loop, replaying the moment. The silence. The laugh. His laugh. The sound now seemed alien, the act of a madman. He had tried to calculate the damage, but the numbers were too vast. The sterling deal was not just a deal. It was the capstone of his career, a $400 million acquisition that would have cemented his legacy. Gone. Just gone. All because he hadn't known. Because she hadn't told him. The blame curdled in his stomach, a hot, acidic bile. He had moved from shock to a towering, paranoid rage. She had set him up. Clara, his quiet, mousy, irrelevant wife, had orchestrated the most public, humiliating corporate assassination in New York history. She had planned it. The drawing, the secrecy, the timing. It was all a deliberate trap. She had waited until he was at his most triumphant, his $250,000 donation on the board, and then she had pulled the pin. He turned from the window, his fists clenching. The door to her study remained closed, locked. He had knocked, then banged, then finally, in the small, desperate hours of the morning, he had thrown his shoulder against it. The solid oak hadn't budged. He had only succeeded in bruising his shoulder and cementing his own impotence. His phone, the one he had tossed so carelessly onto the table, buzzed. It was 6:01 a.m., a text from his assistant, Sarah, a woman who was usually invisible. "Mr. Bishop, you need to see this. The first edition of the Times is online." A link followed. He tapped it, his hand trembling. His phone screen was instantly filled with the digital face of the New York Times. Not the business section, the front page, above the fold. Isabella Montgomery had not just filed a story, she had deployed a weapon. The headline was simple, devastating. "The Hummingbird's Roar." The subhead, Clara Bishop's $1.5 million gift. Upstage's husband's $50 joke in night of unprecedented philanthropy. His blood ran cold. He read, "The Pierre's Grand Ballroom, a room that has witnessed a century of New York's triumphs, last night hosted a drama that eclipsed any on Broadway. It was not a night of finance, but of fire. The fire of Marcus Bishop's hubris and the quiet, unquenchable fire of his wife, Clara. Marcus Bishop, a man who has famously bulldozed his way to the top, gave $250,000, a donation for which he demanded and received thunderous applause. He was the king, and the ballroom was his court. Then, his wife, Clara Bishop, a woman known to most of the city only as a quiet shadow on his arm, stepped forward. Her gift was a small drawing. What happened next will be etched in the annals of New York society. Marcus Bishop stood, laughed, and boomed to a room of 500 stunned witnesses. "What's the starting bid? $50? The cruelty was breathtaking. The condescension was absolute. What Mr. Bishop did not know, what he, in his staggering arrogance, could not know, was that his wife's doodle was the dedication plaque for the new $1.5 million Clara Bishop Wing for pediatric oncology, a project she had personally and secretly funded for 18 months. In a single moment, the narrative of New York's most powerful couple was rewritten. The Titan was revealed as a jester. The shadow was revealed as the sun. William Sterling of Sterling Logistics, the night's other major prize, was seen leaving the ballroom immediately following Mr. Bishop's joke. One source close to Sterling confirmed he called the deal dead on arrival, stating, "I don't do business with fools." Marcus Bishop didn't just lose a deal last night, he lost his mask. And in the silence that followed, Clara Bishop found her voice. "The city is listening." Marcus dropped the phone. It clattered onto the marble. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. She talked to them," he whispered. "That quote. Dead on arrival. That was Vance. That snake, Vance, was feeding them quotes." He scrambled for the phone, his mind racing. "Lawyer. I need a lawyer. I'll sue. I'll sue Isabella. I'll sue the Times. I'll sue Vance for slander. He dialed his personal lawyer, Robert Kenzie, a man who had made scandals disappear for 2 decades. Kenzie picked up on the first ring, his voice already weary. "Marcus, I've seen it." "You're going to fix it," Marcus yelled, pacing. "We file for libel. We demand a retraction. We say Isabella is in Vance's pocket. Marcus, stop." Kenzie's voice was flat. "Just stop. You can't sue for libel when the entire room is the witness. I've already had 3 calls this morning, not from reporters, from board members at Bishop Holdings. They're concerned. Concerned? I built that company. They're concerned about a society column? They're concerned about the sterling deal, Marcus. They're concerned that $50 doodle is the #1 trending topic on Twitter in the United States. They're concerned that a video of you laughing, filmed on a guest's phone, already has 4 million views. This isn't a column, Marcus. This is a public execution. Your stock is going to hemorrhage on the opening bell. Marcus sank onto the sofa, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a cold, liquid terror. What? What do I do? You need to make a statement. You need to apologize. You need to grovel. And you need Clara standing next to you while you do it. You need to look like the proud, supportive husband who was in on the surprise all along. You need... The click of a lock. Both men on the phone fell silent. Marcus turned his head, his heart pounding. The door to the study was opening. Clara emerged. She was not the pale, trembling woman from the stage. She was not the tired, resolute woman from last night. She was calm. She was dressed, not in a robe, but in dark trousers, a simple white silk blouse, and a sharp, tailored blazer. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like she was going to a business meeting. In her hand, she pulled a single, elegant, wheeled suitcase. She did not look at him. She walked directly to the foyer, placing the suitcase by the front door. She picked up her purse from a side table, checking its contents. Keys, wallet, phone, Clara. Marcus's voice was a dry croak. He stood up, the phone still clutched in his hand. Clara, what are you doing? She finally looked at him. Her eyes were clear. There was no rage, no tears. There was, terrifyingly, nothing. It was the look one would give a stranger who had tried to cut in line. Mild annoyance. Finality. "Kenzie," Marcus said into the phone. "Call me back." He hung up. "What is that?" he demanded, gesturing to the suitcase. "A little trip? You're going to your mother's?" "I don't have a mother, Marcus. You know that," she said, her voice even. "I'm going to the Carlisle." "The hotel? For how long? A few days?" "Fine. Take a few days. Cool off. But first, we have to deal with this." He snatched the phone from the floor, holding the screen up to her. "You see this? You did this. You've ruined us." "I have done nothing, Marcus," she replied, pulling on a light trench coat. "I funded a hospital wing. You did the rest. You and your $50. The words hit him like a slap. He recoiled. The desperation clawed at him, changing his tactics. He couldn't bully her. He would have to beg. "Clara, baby, look." He moved toward her, his hands outstretched. "Last night, I was a fool, an arrogant, blind fool. I didn't understand. I was embarrassed. I was proud and I didn't know how to show it. I was wrong, okay? I was wrong." She studied him. "Yes, you were. So, we'll fix it. Kenzie says we just need to stand together. We'll call a press conference. We'll tell them it was all a brilliantly planned surprise. We'll laugh about it. We'll renew our vows. We'll donate another $1 million. Together. The Marcus and Clara Bishop Fund. Yes, that's it." He was manic now, the ideas coming in a panicked rush. He was standing in front of the door, blocking her. He had her cornered. Clara sighed. It was a small, tired sound. "Move, Marcus." "Not until you listen to me. I am trying to save us. Do you have any idea what you've done? You'll have nothing. I'll have my lawyers." She cut him off. "Your lawyers? You think I'm afraid of your lawyers?" She looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time, He saw the bloodline of the formidable woman who had left her that trust. Let me be very clear. If you fight me, if you dare to contest this, I will not be your only problem. What's that supposed to mean? He scoffed, but a thread of fear wove through his voice. Who do you think the press will side with? The arrogant billionaire who humiliated his wife, or the silent philanthropist who just funded a children's cancer wing? Who will the board side with? The man who just lost the biggest deal in their history because he couldn't control his own ego, or the woman who is now the most beloved figure in New York? You try to ruin me, Marcus, and you will be deposed from your own company by the end of the week. Your shareholders will riot. She took a step closer. He could smell her perfume. It was clean, simple. It was not the heavy scent he always bought her. You have no power here, she whispered. You gave it all away last night, for a laugh. Now, for the last time, move out of my way. He was beaten. He knew it. Every word she spoke was the undeniable, catastrophic truth. He was no longer the Titan. He was the husband. He was the joke. He stepped aside, the motion wooden, mechanical. Clara's personal cell phone, the one he didn't have the number to, rang. She looked at the screen, and a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Good morning, Dr. Reed," she said, her voice warm. Marcus watched, frozen, as his wife listened, her face brightening. "Oh. The Today Show? This morning? Yes, I suppose I could. I could be at the studio in 30 minutes. Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Evelyn. It's a wonderful idea." She hung up and looked at him. "It seems I have an interview." She reached for the door handle. As if on a cruel, cosmic cue, his own phone rang. He looked at the caller ID. William Galloway, the chairman of his board. He answered it, his hand numb. "William." "Marcus," the chairman's voice was gravel. "Don't come into the office today. The board is convening an emergency session. We'll send you a link." The line went dead. A virtual meeting. He was being locked out of his own company. Clara pulled the heavy penthouse door open. The sound of the elevator dinging in the hall, arriving for her, was the sound of a bell tolling. "Clara, wait," he said. One last, pathetic plea. "Don't. Please." She paused in the doorway. She looked back at him, standing alone in the vast, sun-drenched tomb he had built. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "I was terrified for years. Terrified of you. Terrified of this life. Terrified of being nobody. But when you stood up and you laughed, when you did the worst thing you could possibly do, I wasn't scared anymore. You had no more power over me. You weren't a titan, Marcus. You were just a small, loud man in a big, empty room." She stepped out. The door, heavy and silent, snicked shut, leaving him alone in the piercing quiet of the morning. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. In one night, a quiet artist toppled an empire of arrogance, all with a single, misunderstood gift. Clara Bishop proved that true power isn't shouted from a stage. It's built quietly, with purpose and integrity. She didn't just donate a building. She reclaimed her name, her legacy, and her life, leaving her cruel husband with nothing but the echo of his own laughter. What did you think of Clara's ultimate revenge? Was Marcus's downfall deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you loved this story and want to hear more dramas about justice, betrayal, and the quiet strength of those who are underestimated, please hit that like button. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the quietest people often have the most to say. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring that bell. You won't want to miss the next story.